Is this thing alive? It's a little... Okay, whatever. All right, okay. All right, so lots of good things. So we're going to talk, yes, some more about epidemics, diseases, a simple model of it, which takes us, we talked about the SIR model the other day, right? Just very basic kind of thing. It's been around since the 1920s. We're just going to go off into a little development of that into a reasonable thing when we start to add a very stylized version of population mixing. And we'll show that things kind of fall apart in terms of trying to represent it by one number. This R0, the reproduction number, I fixed up some terrible notation, which is sort of stuck. There's this problem, there's SIR, and people will do different things, and this is redacted, removed, various things, refractory, and then there's R0, and these things have nothing to do with each other. So that was well done. But this is reproduction. Sometimes you'll see a calligraphic, but it's not working out. So generally speaking, there is a horrible notation issue. List of epidemics, a fun thing to look through. As far as we know, this is I tweeted this, or Pox tweeted it. Very bad thing. So this is, let's see, the plague of Justinian, the first bubonic plague, it's around 500 AD. I think about 40, people estimate 40% of the population, bad. Then there's nothing really terrible for a while, except Europe is, goes through it has no mind in this point, right? There's sort of no literature in England for a couple of hundred years because, I don't know what happened. A little bit of, the Dark Ages. And then we've got, the bubonic plague comes back. This is 800 years later, long time. And then, of course, our records start to be better with all sorts of things. There are a number of these massive cholera outbreaks. There's the 5th one, the 6th one, the 7th one. And in some ways, some of these last for years. Some of these do last for years. And, of course, the flu is this annual thing that mutates and can be terrible. And some estimates are here. The one that's probably stands out in an awful way, so you see this, it's not really true. 1961, the 7th cholera pandemic, it's not really true. But AIDS, actually, of course. So AIDS is, in terms of something that lasts, it's to present. And that's different to all of these other things. As far as, maybe there's some others, but it seems to be different. All right, fun, bad things. Okay, so I think, so I talked about pandemic. There's the board game. There's also an online game where you can be the disease, which may appeal to some of your sensibilities. You can be the thing that tries to destroy all of humanity. That is your goal, is to wipe out everyone in the world. So, sometimes when I mention the game Pandemic, because it's a cooperative game, which I think is really cool, right? Instead of trying to, you're playing against the game mechanic, the first reaction is, oh, it's that one. Yeah, I love that, where you kill everyone. And I'm like, no. What's that? True, not a very smart pathogen. Yeah, there's not a lot of these. Right, viruses don't have a lot of. So the smart ones, the ones that evolution has kept around in some sense, do a better job. Yeah. Yep. So don't eat everything in the fridge. Basically, is the plan. All right. That's just a little philosophy for you. Okay. All right. So social contagions. Next. And so I was going to. What happened to this? It went boink. Okay. So let's have a brief recap. See if Yosemite explodes into flames. Oh yeah, and we should do a crossword as well, right? Yes. Outstanding. All right. We can see cryptic crosswords. Very important. So these things are infectious, right? So produce epic novel when lost in thought. So it's produce epic novel means make an anagram of those two words, and you get lost in thought, which is preoccupied. And this is English, right? This is the English thing. This is where it all goes wrong, cryptic crosswords. And so they're not all anagrams, there's all sorts of stuff. Batting position, for example, which I guess it makes sense. Cricket, that silly game cricket, but also baseball. So it's in stance. You're actually you're in your stance in cricket, which I guess is true in baseball. But instance, for example. An example is a instance. So it's full of these bad things. This is good for your brain. See, I don't think robots can do this, or algorithms. I think this is an interesting test for your genius, the Turing test and so on. Can they solve cryptic crosswords? Anyway, I recommend these things. So my math teacher in year 11 used to hand me this. It was from the Australian, which is Rupert Murdoch's attempt to have a decent paper in Australia. It's whatever the broad page thing. Yeah, but it's the London Times, which is a particularly notorious one. Okay, all right, very good. That's sitting here for me to be happy about. Okay, so it doesn't work. Right, so we had this little story that here's some example or kind of a historic record where we can think of a disease as being de novo, starting again. Right, it is measles, it is still measles, but this example is, but we can think of it like that. If we look at the flu, it's for Iceland, it's much more contiguous. It doesn't really have a abate. There's always some flu going on. Trouble. So the observation was from this that these are not really good power law size distributions because we're desperate to find power law size distributions. That's what people do. But as we know, that's not really true. These are kind of, either it doesn't take off or it spreads in this kind of very uncertain way, right? There's almost a flat kind of distribution here. So we get excited about that and we'll manically try to produce it with a model. And the other element here that's, certainly doesn't come out of a simple model is resurgence. Right? I'll show you an example later on, just the simple SIR model, when the thing takes off, that's it. It just takes off, and it's a nice, smooth, everyone's getting infected because it's random mixing. There's no way you can kind of back out of that. All right, so it's resurgence. Okay, we had this silly thing. We'll probably have more of those. Yes. Community, great show. All right, so can we get a simple model that produces some of these things? And we're really talking about prediction, right? We're trying to get to prediction. How do you predict how bad these, can you predict how far this thing's going to spread? And I guess I tweeted a plot of this. In West Africa now, the numbers are really going up in a very continuous kind of way. It's not really, it's too early yet, I suppose, to have some kind of bumps and so on. But further away, we have very rare events right now, right? So in the US, in Spain, there's India, I think. There are 1 or 2, 3 people. It's very rare, so it's kind of a bumpy thing. All right, so most simple models, and I'll give you a simple model that goes a little bit beyond this. Most simple models will do something like this. They either, so you've got your population, you nastily put a bad thing inside it and let it spread, right? And it has some mechanism for spreading. You can have a network, you can have people bumping into each other. We can have this kind of compartment model where you have some rates of interaction between people, or you can have a fixed network. These are the people you really talk to. And it could be humans, it could be naked mole rats, whatever. There's some species or trees. We could have trees getting sick. Okay. Of course, we are human-centric, so we think about humans a lot, but there are a lot of bad things spread in all sorts of species. Okay, so, and trees can't run away, so that's a problem for them. Let's see, so, hence the koala. All right, so these are what we'll call bimodal, right? Either nothing, it kind of just goes and doesn't get anywhere, or it's all over, right? It spreads everywhere, right? So there's a little bit of stochastic stuff happening at the start, and if it catches fire, so to speak, to use these analogies, then it's off. So that's typical of, say, network kind of things, or where there's some little algorithm sort of structure to the way the thing spreads. But differential equation models, you never get nothing, right? It just perfectly takes off, and there's some fraction that's infected because differential equations. We have a great desire to model everything with differential equations, but it doesn't always work out. So network models, even so some of the ones we've seen, right? Scale-free, small world, they have just even that. I mean by small world, I mean that specific toy model, right? Tends once it gets going, it tends to hit some typical size. Now, the way it spreads, say in a small world one, can be funny too, because it's starting, it slowly gets around, and then there's a leap somewhere, and that's a good sort of example of, or sort of capturing of, someone traveling on a plane, or a kangaroo going along hop, infecting another mob. So there are a couple of things floating around. So these are the ones that in the end we have to get to, these metapopulation models, and I'll show you a couple of examples that are being built now. So you go from simple models that everyone can understand, and you can maybe you can do simulations with, people can verify them, to sort of the kitchen sink. Sometimes you can get in between those things. Fluid dynamics is a good example, right? So you don't start with a ball with air flowing around it, for which you can solve equations, and maybe you do it in 2D and then sort of make it right. So that's a hard thing to solve, but people have been able to figure that out. A lot of suffering with pen and paper, and you can get some sort of exact solutions in special cases. You don't deform that thing slowly into an airplane, or you don't slowly go between those two things. You sort of you have your differential equations for fluids, and then you invent computers, and you do all sorts of things, right? Okay, so that's hard. So there isn't that's always this tension, right? You can make this simple model which gives you ideas, and that's what we're going to get to here, or you can go for the whole thing. And these are hard. They're definitely hard because there's a lot of black boxness and all sorts of things that no one knows about. So there are. This is just kind of enjoyable. So a forest fire model. So this actually. So it's a while ago, appeared in Nature. This is the whole, I know what icing models are like, which we talked a little bit about, and percolation models. It's a percolation model, right? Human decision making is percolation models. Like I'm a physicist, I know everything. Physicists are smart people. So the ones who jump past this are all it's okay. But it's a typical, I have a hammer and everything is a nail situation. So, okay, I don't know if you can see that. That should be clickable. Let's bring that up, because that is a relevant piece here. Yes. Right. So you're trying to predict, so this is a physicist, typical physicist situation. You're trying to predict the behavior of insert complicated system. Just model as a simple object and then add some secondary terms to account for complications I just thought of. Easy, right? So why does your field need a whole journal anyway, right? Liberal arts majors may be annoying sometimes, but there's nothing more obnoxious than a physicist first encountering a new subject, right? What's his rollover? If you need some help with the math, let me know, but that should be enough to get you started. No, I don't need to read your thesis. I can imagine roughly what it says. Okay, so this is more true than funny. Okay. All right, so this is a funny business. I mean, this is just a funny business. All right, let's look at this. So we have a model for magnets, which is itself a crazy model of real magnets, right? Let's put little spins on a little lattice. That's completely bananas, and some maniac graduate student called Ising does that in the 1930s, and it becomes a thing. Yeah. Okay, so that's already bananas, but that works. So it's a fantastic miracle, and it's cool. And then there's all this math you can do. So you go and do that. But it really does work in a deep sense. So here's the analogy then. Let's use magnet-like models that we made for forest fires to represent epidemics. And the claim from this work is that this is sort of about the only thing that exists, that's why I'm talking about this, that exists prior to sort of mid-2000s that talks about sizes of epidemics as a distribution, right? There just wasn't a lot of work on that. So it turns out that at least some measures of epidemic size distributions would match up with 3D and 5D, which is pretty weird, right? 5-dimensional lattices of a kind of so forests on 5-dimensional lattices and 3-dimensional ones. So obviously we're escaping a little bit from the forest story here. But the simple kind of forest thing, right? You burn a tree and it can burn the trees next to it, that sort of spreading thing. Okay. There's data from, as we've seen, Iceland, also the Faroe Islands, which produces very strong people and not many trees, that there's a claim that these exponents match. It turns out the forest fire models are tricky. They're not completely understood. There's fantastic arguing about whether the thing produces a true power law analytically. Anyway, all right, fine. Okay. So we've seen this for a couple of examples. Let's see. So this is going to be the Faroe Islands, and so you see 1912, 1962. These are 50-year periods. So let me draw a pinch. So this is a complementary cumulative distribution, which you guys know about, right? And this is a log scale, so we have a straight line through it. But there's been enormous binning here, right? There are only 4 points. So this is a very shaky business. So it's drawn a line through that one and said that that's a parallel size distribution. And this is to be contrasted with, let's go back to, I know this is bad of me. It really, if you bin it more generously, then you end up with, well, generous could be the other way, a big spike here and then kind of flat. So if you start to kind of spread things out a little more, put these bins in funny places, and also bin them logarithmically, which is a very naughty thing to do, then you can start to produce this shaky looking thing. All right, so total madness, but nature. Okay. Let's see. So, all right, that's one. It's a toy model kind of thing. Didn't work out. Oh, gotta get my citations. Sad. I have to run through LaTeX 4 million more times. Okay, so there are, there's early on people saying, well, clearly it's not just an SIR model. You have people moving around, and then they're moving around at different scales, so we should do that. Okay. So that's been noted by geographers and epidemiologists. There's a work by Longini, and that would have been, I think, in the early 90s or 80s. The reference is dead at the moment. Which is 2 scales. You're just mixing locally and then globally, right? Which, okay. So it's 2 scales. And it shows you get different stuff. This was a paper in Nature in 2005 or 6, and it was for Portland, I think. So you've got Portland, you've got the census data for Portland, you've got the map of it, and you make a simulation of how people move around, right? They're dropping their kids off for daycare, they're going to work. So you run this city, and then of course because you're an evil scientist, you put just on a computer, you put a horrible thing in somewhere, and the kids go off to school and sneeze on each other, and then you see how bad it is. Okay. And because people, of course, coalesce in workspaces and then go back out and then move to different places, it's pretty bad, is really the story, right? You have these kind of hub-like things. So that was getting there. This is more of the kitchen sink type model. We're going to try and do the whole thing. So that's for one city. Bad luck to Portland. And then, of course, this has been done for other places. This comes out of Los Alamos. They do interesting things there. Let's see. So, and this is, then we get to work. So Vittoria Kolica should have led a bunch of papers on airlines, right? So now we have data for airlines. You can get data on how many planes fly between different places. You can get estimates of passenger numbers. So you can talk about rates. And this has been, to my knowledge, this is sort of there are a couple, but this is the strongest, representation of that, and it's Vespignani at Northeastern, where they're really trying to model this in a big way for the world, right? And so you'll see this character will pop up if they go to a scientist. He should be the person they talk to. All right, so Gleam, they have this thing called Gleam. What do they call Gleam? It's got a thing. It must have a thing. Anyway, I've forgotten what it is. But they're trying to simulate this and see how bad it is. And so this is a sort of thing that hopefully you can get out some of these weirder narratives for how things can spread, right? So the simple narrative, I think we talked about the other day, is, there was a question yesterday in the talk about viruses and disease spreading by our guest speaker, which was, why don't we just put a wall around these countries? And, because that's pretty easy to do. First of all, that's just not going to work because you can't do that. But that's a kind of an obvious thing, right? Quarantine exists for a reason. If you can do it, then it sort of makes sense. But sort of the reality of people moving around and the scope of this thing, maybe it all goes to pieces because people move in unpredictable ways and so on. So which is a more complicated story to figure out. But we have, or at least some groups have the modeling tools to do it. Do you want me to show you these? It's a psychological break. Okay. I love this. It's great. ABBA. It's good. They're all zombies, basically.
Lockdown perimeter!
Speaking. Wow, 6 hours on the dot.
Yeah, well, practice makes perfect. You the only witness?
I am.
Hey, we got uninfected in here.
How many we talking?
I think it might be all of them.
All right, scenario B. Repeat, scenario B. Let's dose these suckers.
Dose what now?
It's a great episode. You should watch this. So it's a Halloween episode, actually, from the second season of this thing. Is it? Second season. Very funny. You have to appreciate what's going on there. Scenario B. All right. Okay. Great. When someone says, "Are you the only person who knows about this?" You really should not say yes. No. And they're good at playing off these things. Okay, all right. So nice. Okay, all right. So that's really, so we've got to do the full kitchen thing. You got to do it, right? But it might be hard to get some intuition from it. So let's do it. So we're going to run through a simple model. That's going to be the rest of this. We'll run through a simple model, and we'll try to get at this problem of what's this, how far is this thing going to spread? So if you've got something taking off you've got Ebola taking off in West Africa, do you start modeling at the Earth scale, or the world scale, or West Africa scale? And typically it's sort of been after the fact, right? So it spread this far, and now we can fit a model to it, which is just bananas. So SARS was the example, a few years ago, and of course, in the end, it was less than 1,000 people that are supposedly accounted for. I mean, there was a strong reaction to it. I think one thing I should add to this, I mean, as I showed, right, with the Wikipedia, if you look through that list, if you really look down through that list, it's bad. I mean, it's really bad. And so we put it into our stories. Of course, now we make movies about Contagion, things spreading everywhere and people turning into zombies, because it's a horrible thing. It's a really bad thing. And when something's taking off, and Ebola's, seems to have modified a little bit. It's not as dangerous as it was. So now it's a different kind of Ebola. It's a reasonable fear to have. So anyway, we just don't know. And of course, then we go out and drive cars, which statistically is just a much worse thing to do. All right. But there is that unknown, of course. All right. Okay. So these simple models, if we're playing SIR, we have to know what the final size is, or we don't even talk about a final size. We just say it's a fraction, some fraction of what? Okay. All right, so here's a little, you've seen this before, so we'll use this sort of thing again. Right, so people live in context. Here are the individuals, they live in context, and that gives rise to some sort of interaction. We've got these guys. Oh yeah, so I tweeted this, board of directors. There's I'm just going to say, where is it? There's a paper here you can look up if you're interested, which says, stock fluctuations are correlated and amplified across networks of interlocking directorates, which is pretty, right? So boards of your directors are spread across boards, and that gives you connections between the organizations or the corporations. That seems, we'll see how strong that result is, but it's interesting. It may not be causal, of course. It may all just be correlated. Okay. All right. So we have the identity thing. So we've talked about this. Groups are a big deal. It's how people interact with each other. I can skip this. And so we have some sort of, drawing back in terms of the specific context that people in this case, work in. Now, it could be geography, right? And it may not be exactly this, of course, but geography is funny, and I still haven't seen a good, well, I mean, we're getting there somewhere with the Dirk and Dirk paper, right? That gives you a piece of it. And I still think there's almost a great visualization. So instead of a map of the world, you'd have a kind of a map, but you poke at a point somewhere, and it gives you a heat map of how far everything is away from that point. Because, right, because you can't, and then you can just poke at different places and you can see that. I mean, I think that would be spectacular. All right, okay. So here's here's a toy model. So it's with Duncan a few years ago. It's a PNAS paper. And so we're going to have this hierarchical metapopulation model. That's going to be the key, right? We're going to have SIR type things. You're in your workplace or your school, whatever it is, or your marching band. That's going to be where diseases will pass around, and it's just a sort of a simple SIR model situation. But then you're going to move between these contexts in a more complicated way. So we have SIR locally. It's going to be discrete time. We're going to have some infection probability beta. So this is all very much what's been in the past. So that's the idea. Take a toy model that everyone believes in or uses, extend a little bit. We'll have a recovery probability, and then we'll have a probability of travel. So that's going to be a thing we'll add, this big P, which in general will be small. And with that, we have to have what's the typical distance they travel. So they select from a distribution, and we'll have this exponential distribution. And so there's some typical travel distance, Xi, here on the bottom, because Xi is fun. So it's an exponential thing. So typically, if someone travels, they want to travel locally, but now and then they'll travel a little further, and increasingly more rarely, they'll travel to the other side of the world. Here is a little schematic for it. So you've got your groups. This you're here, you're saying, you're spreading your horrible diseases around, or your crazy rumors. And then now and then you'll travel to another place and start talking about Justin Bieber to these poor people who have never heard about Justin Bieber. Or what's the thing that you get in, the warm, the snuggly thing that has, no? Does anyone know this thing? Yeah, it's like a blanket pillow thing. No, a blanket, all right, okay. Snuggie, yeah, thank you. You exhort the greatness of Snuggies. Or Ugg boots. Ugg boots somehow escaped from Australia to the rest of the world, where it infected people in a different way, because in Australia you don't walk down the street with your Ugg boots on. Okay, you wear them at home and you love them, but you don't walk down the street. Anyway, it's a little hard to handle. Well, all those sheep. I had to use them for something. All right, so I like sheep. Okay, so here's the model output. That's a simple idea, very simple idea, right? So we're going to have a hierarchy again, this kind of thing, right? With this exponential probability distribution, this decay, you have some probability. So you decide to move, and then you select some distance to move, and then end up in some other context. So they're moving around, they don't come back. It's a bad model. They never come back home. It's kind of strange. But we added just a few things. So this is an important quantity. So this will be expected number of individuals that leave a group. So you infect a group. So there's going to be one person infected in this whole population. There's one group, one person in that group starts thinking about Justin Bieber, right? And then through some horrible mechanism, they start infecting others with it, with this concept. And so you would let it unfold, and then P0 we'll call the expected number that leave proselytizing about Ugg boots to the rest of the world, right? And so clearly you need this to be greater than 1, right? So the average number that leave while infected, and you need that to be greater than 1. So this is, it's coupled with R0, obviously, which is the local reproduction number, but this is another piece. So of course this is a question, right? And we can't answer it properly from this thing, but you can start to think about it. You can, should you restrict travel frequency, which is an idea, right? Let's just only have so many planes traveling, like let's cut it down by some drastic amount. Or do you limit the range? Do you say, no one's allowed to travel outside of North America, or so you got to stay in your continent. That's the new game. So this is the typical distance that people travel, and this is the final size. So if the typical distance that people travel is very small, then they're staying within their groups, right? They're not really, or their neighboring groups, they're never allowed to pop up too far. So it's never going to spread very far. So once that gets to a certain kind of scale, and this all depends on the hierarchy and so on, then you start to get these big So these are error bars here. You get these averages here. You get these big possibilities. And so we'll dig into this a little bit in a few slides, but the final size has this huge range. So it's getting bad. Okay. That's, that totally makes sense, right? So if you're allowed to travel, there's some details in here that are a bit surprising, but so this is the probability or the expected number that leave that are infected. So when that's less than 1, so this is a typical kind of phase transition story. When that's less than 1, it's not working. When it's greater than 1, you're getting 2, 3, 4 people that are making it out into other contexts. And of course, it's just one initial person in a context that gives rise to typically 2 new ones that will leave, say, if P naught is 2. Then this is going to grow exponentially. So that's going to take off. Okay. So again, but these kind of wide end results, that's pretty sensible. Yeah, I mean, again, just a toy model, but you could say there's a sort of a stronger effect than P naught, so you might want to focus on that. I mentioned Vittorio Colizza before. I think one of their papers had something like, if you even, depending on the disease, of course, but it was sort of, if you cut out 90% of all airline transportation, you'll still have the thing spreading worldwide, and of course you've committed economic kind of Armageddon, basically. It's a bad situation. All right, so this is looking at some outcomes that are pretty nuts. Okay, so this is a situation where you have R naught is 3. So typically in the SIR world, an infective will typically get 3 other people infected, random mixing. This is really bad. This is 12. And this is getting at, this is what, so Ebola is often sort of said to be 2. Like you reduce Ebola to 2. Like it has a reproduction number of 2. Measles might be 10 to 20. Measles is insanely infective. You put a kid next to each other and they've just got rashes all over them. It's bad. I mean, measles, it's a bad thing. It puts people down. I think the mortality rate is not, it might be 1 in 10,000 or 100,000. It's not, but it's a terrible thing. But it spreads like crazy, like a rash. Okay, all right. So first of all, we're getting this kind of stylized. We're getting a stylized version of what we saw for Iceland, which is there's a little break here, right? So a lot of things don't take off. It just, someone's infected, they just fail to get other people infected, it doesn't spread. So there's that stochastic bit at the start. But once it does, the final size is incredibly, right? This is 1. 3/4 of the population is toast, in this case, up to here. But there's a huge range. So this is an incredibly, horribly unpredictable situation. And this is just unpredictable, right? Once it starts, if it's got to here, then at least from this, if someone just says to you, this disease took off, it has this, it's got to here, you don't really know, right? So it's a scary story. It's bad. This is R naught equals 12. It's a similar thing. There aren't as many that fail. There's about 1/3 of them of these that fail. But it still has this flat distribution, and it goes all the way up to 1. So this is just taking the SIR model. We are extending it in a particular way, adding a sort of a way for people to move around that has this hierarchical structure, but it just completely transforms the possibilities. Okay, flat distributions, and so very different R naughts give kind of similar. Similar looking overall thing, overall results. So if you have one outbreak of measles and you say, okay, it's here, that's how big it was, and here's some sort of its growth pattern. From this, it's a bit hard to say that it must have come from a 12 or 3 if you don't have a lot of details. And you can get the same epidemics from similar things. So here's also the resurgence. So that's the distribution. Here's the resurgence. These are individual things. Look at this crazy MATLAB behavior. Okay, so this is the number of people who are infected, right? And refracted, they go into a refracted stage. It's not SIRS, it's SIR. And you can think of R, again, it's a dispositional thing. You can think of R as all over, or they're better. So there's a peak fraction here, and then it abates, and so time is running here. So this is the example where everyone's just being mixed together. You say that the world is just everyone has a random chance of bumping into each other. West Africa and New Zealand, fine, right? That's the typical thing, and I mentioned this before. You get a nice, pretty smooth-looking thing, and if it doesn't take off, it doesn't take off. Here are a couple of examples, not too carefully chosen from the model. This is the fraction that ended up being infected. And these are actually just, 2 time series. So you'd think, maybe it's good, right? It's not going to, the disease is abated, we're okay. But then it, really launches again. This one goes on for a long time. It's like still sputtering along here. So, clearly there are other ways you could complicate these things. You could go in different directions, but clearly movement allows for this resurgence structure, which gives it this terrible unpredictability, right? It could have finished here for just a few more. One thing we could do with this is go back here and get that position and then start with some more random numbers, right? Get to the state of the world here and then run it again and see how many actually make it this way. Because you're down to, a few unfortunate flips of the coin here, basically. All right, so that's definitely, you're getting resurgence for sure. What else can we say about this? No, bad. Bad, just terrible. All right, okay. But it does mean that you have to be very careful if you think it's coming down, the cases are going down, that we can just stop, right? You need to keep your efforts up at that point. So, you have a simple multi-scale population behavior in terms of transport with randomness, in terms of how the mechanism works and how people move around. It gives you these broad, ridiculous broad distributions, these terrible, unpredictable distributions, plus resurgence. All right. Okay, so you will still see, and I think maybe I mentioned this, but you'll still see people saying, one number describes everything about a disease, and you'll see these kind of write-ups. And that seems like, that's great, that's really good. Wow, we really understand those things, but it's completely bananas. So, perhaps using one number to describe any system, bad plan, right? The power grid for the US is a 7. It's just nuts. All right, so we've got all these things. It's just sort of a summary slide, blah, blah, blah. Yep, this is so fun. I don't think I need to say these things. Right. So the reproduction number is a bit of it's a bit misleading. So from a public policy point of view, you don't want to focus on that, and we do seem to understand that a little more now. Rare events are a huge problem, which in this model it's true, and it sort of comports with what we understand. Someone takes a trip and sneezes on people, and they end up, in Dallas, and some other people get sick. That's a certainly seemingly rare event. All right. Okay. This is good. Okay, so good. That's plenty of stuff. So we're going to move into social contagion, and there are very interesting. There are a lot of trivial things spread socially and very serious things, right? So, but there's a connection in the literature between this SIR model business, which is the 1920s and 30s, that sort of time, so this is only about 30 years later, people start popping up and saying, well, maybe that's how religion spreads, and quite literally, and how ideas spread and so on. This is I'll fix up these references. This is a paper, sort of a thought piece that appeared in Nature in 1964. It's a well-cited paper because people just point to it, saying, we could use this SIR thing for, how, communism spreads and how, et cetera, right? Spread of rumors, sort of follows on from this piece. Hey, happy time. Okay. There you go. I'll move the nuts past you into the... Please, you may dispense with these objects. Okay, so pretty random, but I went to college in Australia with this fellow's son. Anyway, so the spread of rumors. sort of invoking the same idea, right? Diffusion of innovations. This is a very famous, let's see, let's look it up. The very famous work in marketing, actually. Google Scholar, Bass, 1969. Will it work? Wow. No, this is crazy. So here's this one. This is yeah. So here's a comment from 2004. It's got 5,000 citations by Bass. Wow. I don't know why I can't find the other one. Bass. Let's try it. Okay, here's the paper. It's a new Yosemite. You are terrible. So a new product growth model for consumer durables. Why don't we have? I guess it doesn't find it. Okay. Anyway, a lot of citations because something he wrote about it 35 years later has 5,000 citations. So, all right, fine. So this is how people buy. And this is 1969. So we're thinking about how people bought fridges and televisions. These things that came into being in people's worlds. And they didn't have them before, right? So they didn't have them. So you start with no televisions. And is everyone happy? And then you get lots of televisions, right? So number of TVs. And so this is, it should be sort of, the population, but of course it's some multiple of the population in terms of the fraction you could have. But this kind of thing, so this is a sigmoid curve, appears everywhere, right? So growth things, like your size as a human, you started off and you had this, and there's an exponential growth at some point, slows down a little bit, and then, it goes the other way. So, and you can make up models to fit this until the cows come home, to use a phrase you probably never heard. But you can, and there's lots of little simple differential equation models. Of course, you can make algorithmic ones. So something where there's there's a takeoff aspect to it, but there's a limit, right? There's a resource limit, for example. You can make up all sorts of things. There's a resource limit, and for these, of course, there's just you're selling fridges. There's only so many fridges the population can take. I mean, someone's going to have 10 fridges with wedding cakes in the. Not because they're psycho, because people make wedding cakes. Like, I've seen this, 10 fridges with wedding cakes in their basement. I know. But, someone's going to do that, and they'll have 3 giant mixing machines, So someone's going to do that. But on average, let's say 1 or 2 fridges per person. Right? 1 per family. There's a limit, right? So that's just going to saturate. It's going to have a saturation aspect to it. So these things you can produce all the time. So if you look at Bass's original model, it's actually just an SI model because you don't lose your television. Once you're in the game, although maybe you go to the little screens, right, eventually, so it changes. But screens in front of humans, that's good. That's good. That's not going to do this. So the infection is forever. So it's an SI because you can have SI models: susceptible, infected. Do not have television, do have television. All right. And it's very explicit. I mean, it says, oh, look, epidemiology's done this. Look at all the success. Let's do it. And so once you do that, you can say, here is, actual data on durable goods. So here is an actual data on the number of fridges sold over time. So you have it. And then you can fit, if you have a little differential equation for this SI thing, you can fit it. So you can get out a beta, which is an infection rate. You can just do it. And then you can say that's what it is. Now, of course, it's assuming random mixing of everyone in the US, for example, because most of the data, I think, was for the US. That's probably not true. And kind of amazingly, this model really held on well into, even still now, but well into the 2000s in terms of people using it over and over again. This is just how you model the the spread of something. Now, a big part of it is that's the data you would have, but you don't have the data of who talked to whom and all these sorts of things. So there are, and we'll come back to this with social contagion, that's really what you'd want to have all of these things. You'd want to know who was the person who influenced you, who was the person who said, this movie is cool or whatever, right? Or you should read Harry Potter, or you should try crack cocaine. Whatever the thing is, so actually fashion's interesting because you have a different thing because you can see it, right? So it gets transmitted in a different way. That's why it's good to have the little I voted things, right? People, you want to have your little badge, literally in that case, to show that there's a mechanism to help that social transmission work. Anyway, we'll get to influence. I mean, it's kind of extraordinary. You see it done badly all the time because it kind of still works, buy my thing and I'll give you this, and people are tricking each other all the time.
These models fit competitive ideologies. A lot of ideas are mutually exclusive, right? So you only have one in your head.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I'm just wondering about when you have seeding different ideas and the.
So that has been very poorly studied, and I've tried to get people to work on that quite a bit, including myself. That's one of those people. And we've done a little bit. There's one paper I know which is sort of framed around memes, which is a controversial word to even say. But the idea, that things spread through social media, and that there's an ecology of them, which is exactly right. Obviously, you have an ecology of things that you pay attention to. It's been studied in a very limited way. So what I'll show you is basically the adoption of one idea versus a background of not having it. And you have some other things in your head, but there's a lot of famous work there, and it's gotten a long way. But it's clearly true that there's a competition for attention, and so there's some work on it, but it could be done a better way. Yeah, I think it's very interesting from a marketing point of view, right? So that you have, and I know I've spoken about this, but you have some things are helping each other, right? So Coke and Pepsi are on the same team; they're helping you. Educational things are, so they're fighting against each other, but then they're cooperating against everything else, right? And educational things are cooperating with each other, but then you only learn so much math and so much music and so on, right? There is a sort of fight between them, but as a whole, they're also, up against video games or, staring at the wall, which is another occupation. All right, so I'm sort of going on about this one, but it's this has been a huge cornerstone of theory in market in the marketing literature, and you'll see this. I mean, you have to think of it, some of you are studying these systems that you can't measure everything about, and we as humans we fail all the time, especially in the business world and in politics and so on. But scientists, of course, do it too, which is we can measure these things; they're the important things. Which is, a terrible conflation. But usually the first people say, oh, I can measure these things, that's good. I know there are other things, but I'm going to measure these really well. And then a little bit of time goes along, and those people have retired or gone on to something else, and then the new people come along and say, oh, these are the important things, because of course that's what they measured, right? Yeah. So here's another one. This is spread of fanatical behavior. It's very much an SIR type model. It has compartments. So not just a normal, nothing going on sort of person to someone who's a little exposed to it. So they go through compartments to, obviously it seems, you can see where this emerged from. It was probably funded by the TOD or something. Things like this, spread of Feynman diagram. So Betancourt we've mentioned actually, so he's the cities person, right? And he's done very interesting work there, but this is the spread of people using Feynman diagrams in their work. You can think of all sorts of things, but this is that spread socially, but these are examples where people have used a little bit of SIR-ness. Did he use that? That's a good question. All right, I have a little piece here. This is related, so we've talked about epidemics. So predicting social catastrophe, that's not easy. We like to talk about it. So this is Greenspan. This is 2008. So this is a while ago now, right? So 6 years ago, and I have some stuff from 2007. So there, things happen. Things have changed since then. So this is Greenspan saying that he put too much faith in self-correcting power of free markets. Those of us who look to the self-interest of lending institutions to protect shareholders' equity, myself included, are in a state of disbelief. Do you feel that your ideology push you to make decisions that you wish you had not made? And I'm not this is not a political thing I'm saying here. I'm just saying economists are terrible. I want to be clear. Economists are terrible. The dismal science. I mean, they get some things right, but it's kind of a mess. It's not as solid. So yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant. I don't know what this is, but I've been distressed by the fact. There's that one. So this is from a, so that's sort of an awakening that things aren't great. Okay, this is from preceding this, so there's a year before. I've been dealing with these big mathematical models of forecasting economy. This is an interview. If I could figure out a way to determine whether or not people are more fearful or changing to more euphoric, I don't need any of this other stuff, which is a pretty strong statement. Let's just get rid of the math, or maybe there's math here. I could forecast the economy better than any way I know. It's not how it usually works. Trouble is we can't figure that out. I've been doing this for 50 years. I'm no better than I ever was. Nobody else is. Forecasting 50 years ago was as good or as bad as it is today. The reason is that human nature hasn't changed. We can't improve ourselves. So this is just sort of like the words are spinning out, the words are coming out. This sort of gets into a little bleakness at the end. This interview was the learned response, which was beeped, of course. So the interview, and I hope that link works. But this interview is worth watching. It's about 10 minutes long. It's it's a very interesting piece about how because the Fed is it has a great big dial, right? The interest rate is this giant dial on the thing, which is pretty weird. Or you can think of it, whatever you want to do, think of it as a lever, right? You have this lever that you can just kind of move a little bit. And then there's a big economy there, right? Just like one lever, which is, if you're flying a plane, that would be hard. Would be kind of a problem. I have a lever, and it only goes down so far, which is kind of an issue too, right? So, yeah. But the whole interview is quite interesting. And so, of course, this is a while ago. Let's see. This is James Galbraith. There are at least 15,000 economists in this country, and you're saying that only 2 of them foresaw the mortgage crisis, 2 or 3 of them, maybe 10, right? And what does that say about the field? Obviously, we're pandering to the crowd here, which claims to be a science. Here is the, it's an enormous blot on the reputation of a profession. Tens of thousands, most of them teach. God, they'd hate me for saying this. And most of them teach a theoretical framework that has been shown to be fundamentally useless. Yeah. Boom. All right. So that's rough, but it's hard. It's hard trying to predict how things will spread. People make a lot of money out of, they claim, claims that they can predict which song will take off, which candidate will win. And we've seen some places where people have been good at this, right? And so Nate Silver, of course, is, the champion geek. It's like geeks ruling the earth. It's like Nate Silver. Okay, so we've got to acknowledge the Nate Silver action. All right. So every now, right, he'll have the whole, let's predict the election, let's do it really well, and then he'll spend a year trying to find out where the best taco is. That seems to be the preoccupation of 538 at the moment. Anyway, all right. Fun times. Okay, so social contagion, cool. Let's start this off. These guys. Okay, lots of background. So this is a little bit of spreading. There's an article I stripped a ridiculous thing. They'd made a GIF, because let's do that because they're cool again, right? Yeah. So a little image magic action. I stripped it back to, which is it's cool. You can do that. You can pull it apart because they're overlaid. Sorry. Okay, 1960. This is the most. So this is always a little funny to look at these kinds of maps because what's going on? It's the most common. It's the most common name, right? For babies in that year, in that state. Now, you're missing all of the rest of the distribution. Who's second, third, fourth, fifth? So it's obviously this sort of a bit of a funny thing, but it's okay. So you can see regional structures here, right? James is here, Michael. There are a lot of Michaels in the U.S., right? There are clubs of Michaels. There are just a lot of Michaels. So let's see. So we're going to go through to about 2010, I think. So the Davids are really winning out. James is holding. And so you can see some sort of local structure here. Okay. Where you'd think it is, I mean, obviously media is here, you're hearing, right? You know, you get to see things and so on, but there's definitely some regional structure which suggests some geographic contagion. David fights back, but is crushed by Michael. Alaska's a holdout. John is winning now there, and that's Michael. Wow, that's really, I mean, you know, Jason, okay, Jason. And it's, you know, and some, if you look at the top 1,000 names, there'll be what look like spelling mistakes down it. Right? I mean, there'll be 18 forms of Brittany or something in 2009. And I mean, there are enough of them that they're there, so they're not just one-off aberrations. People are choosing to spell in different ways. And, you know, I think one year I remember reading there were 300 people called unique, which is disappointing. Anyway, but we do this thing. We call each other the same. We repeat these names, you know. Okay, so let's see, how are we doing? Michael says it's 78. Matthew pops up. It's kind of fighting with little Joshua, not with an H. Chris just explodes onto the situation. Michael is really strong. I mean, that's really impressive. This is a long time. That's really a lot of Michaels. Wow, Tyler comes. No, does it make any sense? Tyler, no? Is it? This is 1990? Were they? Okay, that's a pretty good reaction. Let's see, Austin. So Tyler kind of went away. Jacob is now taken off. So it seems to change a little more. And so Jose. So that's a bit, you know, some huge changes, right? From all Michael to Jacob, and this is William. I don't know if you can read all these. That's William, yeah. Vermont says sure, Jacob, whatever. Also the thing is you hear the name once, you think, that's a nice name. And I've only heard it once, so. But one of the things about sampling is as soon as you hear it once, you should think like everyone knows this, you know. I can't read it myself. So it says, Anthony. Nevada's gone for Anthony. The others are pretty solid. Ethan gets a show. Wow. I mean, there really are, you know, and it's not like there are 50 different choices. Jose in Arizona now. Angel in Arizona pops up. Where are we now? 2007. Logan. Vermont went for Logan. It's like striking out with taking its own path, right? Well, what's that? Okay. What can I say? We chose pretty old ones. Noah. Noah's got Noah. Okay. And that's... Okay. We got some Wyatts going on. All right, Mason. And then Mason. Babouge. Okay. And then that's it. 2012. So Liam. So, you know, it starts to move a little bit. Oh, Jacob made a huge comeback. Okay. All right. Good. This is fun. Right? Tell me what's going on. I'm just going to page through this because I think it's... So Mary, bit of a winner here. But this, look, you know, Susan, right? Susan, Donna, Mary again. Susan in Hawaii, because that's where Susans come from. There's a Lori here, so that's a bit different. Anyway, sorry.
I'm just curious, like, whether names were like reflective of pop culture trends or like...
This is religious, right? I mean, this is partly religious, isn't it? Mary and Michael.
There's a bunch of like Bellas now, right? Because she's got her age.
I mean, there really are a lot of Britneys. A lot of it's biblical. So Lisa starts to like, yes. Does anyone know what happens in the 70s for women's names? Any guesses? Okay, so Lisa is in there, and I think that's it. It's just Lisa and Mary at this point. Even, there's a couple of years here where it's just, Lori had a little bit of a burn early on, but it's gone, and then Lisa and Mary, all Lisa. I mean, come on. Yes, that's it. Excellent. Full points to Gryffindor. All right, so, or whatever you want, Slytherin. Okay, Angela. That's Angela. Oh, good work. Michelle is going to take off, and here we are. Right, it's Utah. Kimberly is down here, but that's going to get all crushed. Kimberly nucleates, right? So it goes boop, and then it goes pops out. Angela has spread here as well, right? So Angela goes this way, Kimberly goes this way, and there's a Melissa who's trying to, but there's just a, Jennifer, this is 71, 72, Melissa, Angela, gone, all right. 74, 75, 76, 77. Oh my God. Homogeneous much? Amanda's like a little, please call them something else, Jessica. But that, it went back, right? It's like, no, that was too risque, right? And then it's gone again. So Jennifer really did well in the 70s. That's And now we're divided. Jessica and Ashley are fighting it out. Amanda did pretty well for a long time. There's a Brittany. Oh no, but see, this is Brittany. It's two parts, right? There's Brittany Brittany because of Brittany being a thing, and then, it was a name that took off, so she's part of that. And then her name, once she becomes famous, then it gives it another re-injection into the Ashley. Colors do change. Emily is trying to appear. Come on. No, Emily's doing well. There's a Samantha. Oh, that's a good one. Madison. This is 98. This is new. Alexis. Emily is a winner. Emma. Wow. So we're going through a Jane Austen period. This is great. Ava. So yeah, we have my daughters have a cousin called Ava, and no one was called Ava. It's like the 5th most common name in the country now. Ava, Olivia, boom, Isabella, and that is, Isabella's a big one. What's that? Oh God. Yeah. We had Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then we produced Twilight. It's just unbelievable. That is de-evolution. Oh, God. Thematic disaster. Okay, all right. So that's interesting. That's fun. And you can look at the GIF and then just watch it roll around if that's what you want to do. Okay. So I'll kind of come back to this in different ways, but things that spread well. So BuzzFeed, which you may or may not enjoy, but it's a successful institution. It's allied to the Huffington Post. And so years ago I knew one of the characters who started this was Jonah Peretti, started this thing. And he was the Media Lab, and he had early fame. Maybe I mentioned this, the Nike shoe story. Did I mention that? Okay, so this is in the 90s. Nike had this thing where you could go on, you buy your shoes, and you could get some writing on the side, right? Your name, some cool thing you want, right? That's the idea. So he puts in sweatshop, right? I want, orders shoes, size whatever, sweatshop is the thing. And gets a little thing, because obviously you couldn't use profanities and these sorts of things, right? So it's got some legal writer there sitting. So he gets an email saying, we can't, and it's sort of lawyer speak, right? Saying, we're not going to let you do that. But in long sentences and so on. So he writes back. He's like, "How come on?" It has this kind of funny, sort of smart aleck thing that he writes back, and then it goes back and forth, right, with this kind of pile of lawyer sort of stuff, and he packages it together in an email and then sends it off to 5 or 6 friends or something. And this is funny, it's like, ha ha ha! Look, I played with Nike, and they wouldn't send it to me, but they wouldn't really say why not, right? Because you see them trying to avoid saying that's a bad thing or something, So his friends, they think this is hilarious. They send it off, and so it spreads around the world. This little email gets spread around the world. He gets some abuse from various characters, like, what are you doing? But when things take off like that, you start to get replies from all sorts of people. And someone writes in from an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific, says, "Hey, I'm an," because they love to tell you that, or from space, So he got all these emails from people all around the world, and also it's a bit like going to Vegas, and the first thing you pull or whatever you push it, now you win, right? And it's a terrible thing to happen to a person because you think you're you're lucky. They're watching. So we would and so sort of back when I was at Columbia, there was this kind of, oh, you know, we can just make things spread. And people will say this. People say this. I mean, obviously marketers think this and so on. But it's not easy. It's not easy to do this at all. And so, you know, he went through various iterations of trying to do this, and of course has had great success. I mean, BuzzFeed, in a sense, encapsulates what he's learned, right? So, and a number of others. But these are the things that spread well, right? So it's boiled down to this. So LOLs, something, right? Cute, geeky, trashy, fail, and that kind of WTFs, right? So plus the news spreads. So this is the jokes spread well, right? I mean, certain kinds of jokes, they can spread well because they're lightweight. It's easy to tell. You get some good feedback because someone laughs, says ha ha, and they experience it, right? It has a very natural, I want to spread this thing. I mean, you see this sort of built into advertising all the time, like tell your friends about it. You know, it's just really clunky and stupid. No, you will tell your friends about it if you really actually enjoy it and you want to tell other people about it. So you kind of need to bury the socialness into the thing. It needs to be something that people actually want to share. And of course, you're in some context where lots of things are being shared, so it's a big, timing's a problem, all sorts of stuff. But you make it sort of, anyway, all right. But plus news. So they started with this, and then they added news, and they have quite serious, real news people there writing news. So that's expanding in all sorts of ways. So also a co-founder of the Huffington Post. All right. So these are things. So what I'm trying to say here is these lightweight, jokey things spread well. They do. Now, not every joke does, but I'm just saying that that has a very natural mechanism for it. You want to spread it. News as well. And it's interesting to look at something like the New York Times, and you look at things that people have viewed versus things that people email each other. And that stuff they email is about how much food you can eat, or which, like here's the 3-minute exercise routine that will save you, or something about cats. Like it's all, but you can see that that's a nice thing to spread. You want to send it to someone else because then they'll like you, right? But the stuff about Ebola and I don't know, like the world is going to explode. That's people don't spread. They don't seem to email that as much. They'll read it though. That's different. BuzzFeed jokes. So it's got everything: the lols, the cutes, the fails. WTF. That's their 404 page, which is actually the Daily Show has good 404 pages, which I'm not going to show here because they're a bit dangerous. There are 3. These things spread well. Obviously, cats basically rule the internet. Okay, some things stick. Tattoos. So tattoos, it's a pretty interesting thing, right? That really took off, and there's a bit of religion here as well, I suppose. But they are hard to get off. So, which is pretty interesting because they're sort of ultimately they're a fashion thing, right? And so it's good to be able to move some things around. This is always good, my favorite thing. Yes. Because no one could solve this thing, right? This is weird actually that this spread. Like it actually was just kind of a fun little thing to play with, like just by itself, whether you could solve it or not, which is weird. That's a very unpredictable element of this. What's that? Oh, the lottery. I don't know. I think people just like messing around. Stickers. How hard could it be? Right.
I can't remember the other, but I think there's some great examples of it's like you think this would be easy, the game 2048.
2048.
It's like an iPhone game.
Okay.
You put blocks together, and it's like this thing. It looks like it'd be so easy to solve, and once you know sort of the strategy, it is pretty easy. But I'm just like.
But it's addictive.
Yeah. You think it's easy to solve, but you can't quite.
So your brain is always trying to get that little bit of, and you can progress with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the dopamine is kicking in. Yeah. Threes is a terrible game.
Yeah, it's based off of that.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I know a guy who typically would play 3 hours for a game of threes, which is, he's a very smart guy. He's very, like an enormous brain got attached to this addictive, difficult game, and he had to delete it. Okay, so All right, so there's a little warm up to it, but so I'm going to talk about social contagion for a couple of lectures because it's fun and interesting. We'll have some simple models, see what people have done. There are people who are, being put up for Nobel Prizes now because of some of the work they've done, and part of it is this. So, okay, all right, fun. I'm sure you'll have a lot of input because you are humans. And yeah. Okay. Quoth the Raven is due on Thursday. Thank you. Some of it came back. All right, cheers. The rubber band went missing. All right, that's good.